Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. We are merging the streams here of a traditional, now going on a quarter of a century, sports brand, even longer than that, going back to my Nasty Nestor days, up to where we are now with Baltimore Positive and the new launch this week, just in time for my 52nd birthday. And just to make me feel old, I'm bringing on some old friends of mine. I don't know that I've ever had Jimmy on the program. I know he sort of has wandered behind many shots of mine at Radio Row over the last 15 years. He's done Army, Navy. We've been a partner in those things over the course of time. But, and I wasn't even sure if it was Jimmy Shapiro or Jimmy Shapiro. And much like Ron Shapiro, all of the Philadelphia guys stick together. Jimmy, I wore a green for you. It's Eagles green. It's for my new sponsor, El Guapo. The shirt's a little tight. It doesn't fit so good. Maybe it's my new yoga body. But I see behind you on the set you have Eagles stuff. You're wearing your Sixers gear. When I think of Philadelphia, I think of you. And I thought, I could either get Eskin this week or I can go get Jimmy from Seattle. And I'm like, I want to get you on to hear your story. I had Eskin on last month.
Eskin is wasting away. He's so thin these days. I remember him back when I was a kid in high school and would visit him at a rib place called Ribbit. And I remember him having Armin Gilliam there for an interview. And I was a huge Sixers fan, ended up interning for them the year they traded Barkley. And Howard was 100 pounds heavier back then.
What year was that you worked for the Sixers?
I interned there in the fall of '92.
Was that Favorito or no? No, before that.
No, I know Joe very, very well, but that was the year or two before Favorito. Doug Moe was the coach. He came out of retirement to coach a couple of, not even a full season. He had back-to-back 56, or not back-to-back, excuse me. He had two 56-point losses in the season and got fired. Cared more about his fantasy baseball team than he did about coaching the Sixers.
Well, so my background in that would be that I was at Dr. J's last game at the Spectrum. I actually sat next to this guy, shook his hand. It was 1987. Shook his hand.
86.
86, my bad. Right, correct.
Against the Pacers, I believe.
86,
it might have been 86, 87.
87,
you could be right.
It was 87. It was May 87. Jack Sikma, they played the Bucks. Don Nelson had fish ties. So I'm up in Philadelphia, second level of the Spectrum. Now, at the Capitol Center, they put you down on the court, right? But I go to Philadelphia, and I'm up on the roof up there, and Mike Wilbon winds up sitting next to me at the game, and I didn't really know who he was. He was new at the Post. I covered a lot of hockey, so I knew Kornheiser and Feinstein. I knew all the Boswell and those guys, but I didn't know him. So I experienced Dr. J's last game next to Wilbon. So, I had a thing for the Sixers, and I love Dr. J, and, I loved the NBA when I was a kid. I mean, all facets of that. And yet this year LeBron wins, and when he wins the other day, all I could think about was they all got paid. The league finished its year. You and I usually get together at the Super Bowl at Radio Row. I'm sort of figuring that's not going to happen this year because who's going to be there wanting to be 7 feet away from me? And so a lot of things are going to get broken, including, where we usually see each other every single year, where we have for 20 years. But the notion that they finished their season and now we're with this Titan story and we're maybe expanding things, maybe a bubble, the NFL better take a hard look. They better not be the only league that doesn't finish at this point.
I don't see how they don't finish. I also don't see how they don't add an 18th or 19th week and then just move the week in between the NFC and AFC championship games and the Super Bowl. To me, that would make sense, or even push the Super Bowl further out. I always felt like the Super Bowl should be like a national holiday, so we don't work that next day. So why not push it back to President's Weekend, where Monday there's no school for the kids and people don't necessarily have to work, and you could do all your imbibing, drinking, partying, food comas that you'd like.
Well, I guess the logistics part of this is really incredible. The baseball put their season together. They bubbled up. They're bubbling up now. It looks like they're going to finish next week. They're going to get it done. Hockey got theirs done in the same way, being safe and being scientific. Football's sort of run amok a little bit, right? Like letting the players, hang out with the families. Not that you could sequester them for 6 months in a bubble, but to think that in the middle of a global pandemic, in the middle of a plague, that we wouldn't have positive tests. I mean, you're an Eagles fan sort of trapped out in Seattle. You've worked in this business a long time. Day one of your season, your coach has it, right? So, right off the bat, giving the old speech of let's be safe and let's do everything the right way. It's a virus. Any of us can get it. And the Eagles were first up on that. And I don't know that they've ever really sort of righted the ship here. It's been sort of a rough campaign for the Eagles. The only thing sort of keeping them alive is the fact that the whole division sucks, right?
Oh, the Eagles have got every team. This is really frustrating as a Philadelphia fan because I look at, and I guess I wouldn't be including the Eagles because they won the Super Bowl and that came out of nowhere. That was I consider myself, unfortunately, a glass half empty Philadelphia sports fan, but people that asked me for that Super Bowl, the Eagles going to win against the Patriots. And I was, without question, yes. There's just something about that team. And I'm sure you've had teams in your lifetime that you just knew that there was something about that would win. Now, I've
had two of them, and they won, and we had parades, and it was lovely.
And there was no doubt in your mind they were going to win both of them?
No doubt the first one. The second one, I thought it was more formidable. When they took the big lead, I thought, no problem. Then the lights went out, and things got a little weird. Yeah, for sure. Things got weird after that.
But the Eagles just are kind of flawed in the way they build their team. I mean, just look at the Ravens who drafted Patrick Queen at the end of the first round, and he's playing lights out. The Eagles have $4.3 million total spent on linebackers, which is 32nd in the league. Their long snapper makes more than any linebacker on their squad. They just don't feel like it's an important part of the team. And the Ravens have proven year after year how if you have good linebackers, it's helpful to a defense. Now, it's not saying you can avoid having a good pass rush or good secondary, but they just completely don't care about the linebackers. It's so odd.
Well, watching my boy Jimmy Schwartz try to put the band back together, and I saw your enthusiasm out in the Twin Cities a couple of years ago when it was 5 below, and we're out in the streets partying, and I'm leaving the freaking party, an Eagles victory party, to go straight to the airport to fly home to de-thaw. But I had as much fun at your Super Bowl party as I did at my own because I actually attended it. And buddies of mine, Joe Douglas, and so many people I knew. I mean, Corey Graham was on that team, and Torrey Smith was on that team. Yeah, I walked around that team party, and I knew half the room, and some of the scouts as well. It feels like the whole thing's been sort of fractured, right? I mean, a lot of the guys gone, and I'm seeing Nelson Aguilar catch passes this weekend. My wife's become a Nick Foles fan, so we're watching him do things in other places. That that Super Bowl was a long time ago, sort of, kind of.
It seems like it, and I don't. It might have been an outlier year because you looked at that team, and that as much as any Super Bowl team came out of nowhere. I mean, I guess I'd have to look back in the last 30 years, but I can't remember a Super Bowl team that came as much out of nowhere as that team did.
And with a backup quarterback in the end, too.
Yeah, I mean, the backup quarterback, missing their left tackle, who's a Hall of Fame left tackle, missing their middle linebacker, Jordan Hicks, who's turned out to be a very good player, especially for the Arizona Cardinals, missing one of the top 3 or 4 returners of all time in Darren Sproles, missing their special teams captain and Chris Maragos. They were missing a lot of players, and it was just the next man up thing. And I think instead of now their best players are all older, and they kept doubling down on everything Howie Roseman touched that year turned to gold. And I think he just has not done a great job since then.
Jimmy Shapiro is joining us here. He is in Seattle, but from Philly. And I've never asked you for like a cheesesteak recommendation or a pretzel or whatever. I see you at the Super Bowl every year. I don't even know what to tell people you do. I know you do a lot of PR in a lot of different ways and involved in Vegas in various ways as well. And I get sheets from you on different stuff. And you do Army Navy as well, traditionally here in Annapolis or in Philadelphia, Baltimore, wherever the game may be. Give me a little insight into where you are because you work in the sports business and there weren't any sports for 6 months, Jimmy.
Well, if it's any consolation, my parents don't really understand what I do either. But I pay the bills. He's a nice
boy. He's out in Seattle. He's a nice boy.
He's a nice Jewish boy. He takes care of his family. He calls. He always sends gifts.
He Zooms with me.
He brings my granddaughter back 3 or 4 times a year. So he's a good kid. I would say that I work with various sports books, helping them create odds that I think will get them press. And I also work with various companies that are looking to do media bookings on behalf of a client. For example, I work with Xbox Live at Super Bowl XLIV. It was a natural fit. and I brought Snoop Dogg and Chad Ochocinco and Antonio Gates around the Super Bowl to talk about Xbox Live when it was just being launched. And then I work with the Army-Navy game creating, which is my favorite thing to do, creating a Radio Row, not at the grand level of the Super Bowl, but 20
Well, Roger
stations.
Staubach's there usually. So
Roger
that's
Staubach's
good.
there. We get all the ESPN Game Day crew there. Kirk Herbstreit comes, Desmond Howard, David Pollack, Reese Davis before Chris Fowler. Gary Danielson comes every year. We get Philadelphia legends like Vince Papale and Ron Jaworski to come by. We've gotten Rob Riggle, who is a former military guy, to come by. So always get a wide variety. We've got Joe Girardi to come by. Well, when it was in Baltimore, Buck Showalter came by. So we get a lot of these managers, coaches, they want to experience it. So Buck Showalter wanted to be on the field before the game when he was the Orioles manager, and I worked, I was in Baltimore. We wanted a Baltimore feel for Radio Row, so we brought Buck Showalter by, and I knew him a little from working in Arizona in sports radio, and he was great to work with. Had a very dry sense of humor that a lot of people may not know. What was your dealings with Buck Showalter like?
I don't have a media pass. Peter Angelos took my pass. I had a press pass for 21 years, Jimmy, beginning in 1986. And in 2007, I was not credentialed. And it's been 14 years now. I've been exiled for telling the truth. So I met Buck once or twice. My experience with Buck is he ran from me, usually. Usually there were 3 PR girls between me and him who ran from me. So that's my experience with Buck.
I mean, pretty much everywhere he's went, he's
been a professional. He's
improved the product. And
dude, he made post game as an Oriole manager must see every night. He was great. He was great before the game, great after the game, but I had no experience with him because the owner didn't like me. So that's that.
Right.
Buck and I would have gotten along fine.
It's a little different when you're on that side. We got him press passes, we got him seats. Same thing. Not press passes, we got him field passes, and same with Joe Girardi. And Joe Girardi happens to be a humongous college football fan. When I put him on the college, it's ESPNU now. It used to be College Sports Nation on Sirius. He listens like almost every day. So it was Chris Childers, maybe Danny Cannell or someone else. He was so excited to be on that show. He's like, I listen to you every day. Sometimes we forget that these coaches and they're people and they're sports fans. And so it was really interesting to do that. And the Army-Navy game, I'm sure many people that listen to your show have been to it, but it is an amazing experience.
I went to the Army-Navy game here in Baltimore. It was on my bucket list. I checked it off. All those years back in the 80s and 90s, I was an Eagle season ticket holder from 86 to 92. So the years
Buddy
after
Ryan
the Colts
days,
left,
basically.
Buddy Ryan, Rich Kotite, Gang Green. I always kid Baldinger about that, from back in that era. Vi Sikahema, those guys. I got to know Randall Cunningham later on. He played for the Ravens at the turn of the century. So, but I sat in section 721, row 1, seat 5 and 6. It was a family section. And I was there for, all those disappointing sort of gangrene endings with Reggie White and Jerome Brown and all that stuff. And all those years I, wanted to go up for Army-Navy, and they would play the game up there. Where the weather was always terrible and rainy and cold as hell. And first week of December, the first time the game was in Baltimore, I was syndicated, and I was actually in L.A. It was a bye week for the Ravens, and I was out doing some syndication work when I was syndicated on Sporting News Radio. So I finally got a chance to go in Baltimore, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years, however long ago it was. It was before my wife had cancer, so it must have been 11 or 12, like 12, 13, somewhere in there. And it was really something. I mean, and when it comes to your town, you feel it. And I know they've moved it around a little bit at this point, and what it'll be this year and what it'll be in the future, who knows? But and especially
next year it's in New York. Well, North Jersey.
It's got to make its way to SoFi at some point. They'll have it in L.A. for 100,000 people at some point.
I don't think
They'll
so.
do that. No,
they won't.
They'll always keep it East Coast. Go ahead.
You know why it's in Philadelphia?
Well, I know that they were like carrier ships, and there was beat Army, beat Navy, and it was always there. But go ahead, tell me why.
It's halfway in between Army and Navy.
That's it. Did they have it at the Rose Bowl at one point a million years ago or anything like that?
It's quite possible, but they bring the cadets. The cadets all bus in that morning,
right.
And that's a big part of the game. The pageantry of the game is seeing them sing and heckle the players before games. So they're not going to pay to fly them to the Rose Bowl.
That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, they did Giant Stadium.
It'll be in Baltimore. It'll be in Baltimore again for 2021, sort of the 20-year anniversary of 9/11, or at least the same year. They are planning on I think a lot of the festivities will be in New York, but the game will be in what I don't even know what the new stadium is. It the new Meadowlands? I forget what it's called.
The
MetLife Stadium. Yeah.
Yeah, the people screwed my wife's insurance up when she was having cancer. Jimmy Shapiro here joining us. He is from Philly, but in Seattle. I'll break your heart right now. And, for weeks I've been saying to my wife, man, I want a Philly pretzel. I want, not the one that they got in the grocery store. I want a real Philly, maybe something about the water or whatever. So I'm going to the game this week. I'm doing the road games. Luke does the home games. I flew to Houston, and I went down to D.C. 2 weeks ago. We played the formerly known as the Washington football teams. And Philadelphia, I'm just about the pretzel. How often do you get back, man? You're like a Philly guy. Behind you in your shot, you have fat heads of Eagle stuff. I mean, you're Mr. Philadelphia, and I don't know that you could be. Maybe you went to Hawaii, but you can't be much further away than Seattle or Philly,
I graduated Syracuse in '92 and moved out west for sports radio, Vegas, then Seattle, then Phoenix, then back to Seattle. Got married.
These are all good places, by the way. Better places than Philadelphia. So you're the smart one, Jimmy.
No, I would move home tomorrow. I got 4 more years till my daughter's in college, and then I'll probably move home. It's so expensive here. You talking about with Amazon and Facebook and Microsoft here and Google and Boeing and all these, and Apple has offices here. It's good for real estate, for what I bought my house at, but it is so expensive to live here. And it's dreary. The summers are gorgeous, but it's dreary. People are
You're down on Seattle after all these years. Huh?
People are very passive aggressive here. There's not enough diversity here for my liking. My daughter's half Jewish because I'm Jewish, and there's no Jewish kids at her school that aren't either half Jewish. My ex-wife had 1 black kid in her whole school. I had 28 or 29 in my graduating class, which is probably commensurate with the percentage of black people in society. And it's just not where I want my daughter growing up.
Wow. I hear people speak fondly of Seattle.
It's beautiful and cultural in some ways, in some ways it's cultural.
How long you been there?
God, this is my second time living here. So 21 years. I'm legal here, basically.
Wow. You spent a big chunk of your life. So you're away from your team, your fans, your fun. The Phillies have won a World Series. The Flyers are never going to win. I was there for the clinching
game. I was there for the Phillies clinching game. Here's the thing. My dad is 83, and it has always bonded us. It's one of the things I talk to my dad about,
Sure.
Before games, after games. It is what I keep in touch with my friends about. People are like, well, why aren't you a Seahawks fan? And when the Seahawks won the Super Bowl, I tried to be happy, but I didn't give a crap. I was cursed. Sorry. I just didn't care. I was happy for my friends, but I couldn't get any real. And trust me, if I was blessed enough to watch Russell Wilson for all these years, the guy is amazing. He is everything right about sports, about the world. He is just an amazing player and person, but it's not my team. You love who you love, but I go to 1 Eagles road game a year for the last 6 or 7 years. I was in Lambeau last year. I was at Dallas, Jerry World when they won in overtime on Sunday Night Football. I've been to Arizona. I've been to Baltimore for Army Navy, but never for an Eagles game. I would love to go to that. And I go to 1 Eagles home game a year. I have a dear friend of mine who's done very well for himself, has a suite. So anytime I want to go, I sit in his suite. I've been going to it. This will be the first year that
so you don't feel so far away. That's not so distant for you.
No, I've had DirecTV since 1997, so I have to be up there with having it as long as anybody. You see the lights flickering out here? This is what happens because it rains so much out here. I don't know if you can see how many times the light has flickered here.
Jimmy Shapiro's out in Seattle via Philadelphia. I'm wearing green, not to support the Eagles this week, just for El Guapo, our new sponsor. And so I wanted to have you on and point spreads and betting and the world of betting and we can't talk about that. And, I remember, Jimmy DeGray, we go out to Vegas and the intangibles and, all that stuff. And Vegas was taboo for football. And now the Raiders are there and the Legion and the stadium and Chucky and the whole deal. And I know you spent time in Vegas as well and you have some Vegas connections. What gambling represents for the league, for sports, for the recovery of sports when all of it's over with, because I'm not a gambler. I don't bet on sports. I feel like the coaches don't even know who the hell is going to win. How could I be so presumptuous or arrogant to think that I know which way the ball is going to bounce, and especially put my hard-earned money on it? But
that makes you arrogant,
big part.
I don't think that makes you arrogant. If you're a sports fan, I don't know if you've ever been to England or Ireland or any sporting events in there.
Oh, of course, you bet in the back, man, for years.
You bet in the stadium. Or outside the stadium, there's 10 places to bet. So it's not necessarily, you don't have to be a huge gambler. You have to want a little action. You may take your wife out to a nice dinner and a movie and it cost you $150, $200. What if putting $25 on tonight's Titans, I don't know when this is airing, but the Titans-Bills game,
you better make sure they're playing.
Yeah, adds to the enjoyment of your game. Is it hurting anybody? No, you shouldn't bet anything you can't afford to lose, but is it hurting anybody for you to bet $22 to win $20 on the Bills minus 2.5?
Jimmy, I'm not. Dude, I've spent time in casinos. I bet and lost at a place in Vegas years ago. I just don't bet on football. Like, it's what I do for a living, and I just don't. But I understand that everyone around me I don't play fantasy. I gave that up with rotisserie baseball when I was 27. You know what I mean? So I have a fantasy team, though, the Ravens. When they win, I feel good. When they lose, I feel bad. But I get the action on all of it. And I guess what I'm getting at is on the jersey line and apps and all of this stuff that's going on, we're now getting to the point where you're going to be able to bet on whether Lamar's going to run or pass on this down, and that's going to be –
You already can.
Right. It's going to be a very, very compelling part of the future of sports for younger people.
I don't know if you follow I'm sure you don't follow this as close as I do, but New Jersey – has a couple months ago they've passed Nevada many times, but they had the biggest month in the history of sports wagering a couple of months ago, well, maybe early September, when there was football and baseball and basketball and hockey in the playoffs and all these things going on.
You could bet every night, multiple times. Yeah.
Now, the reason that New York isn't doing as well as New Jersey is because they don't have the online functionality or the app functionality. You have to be there in person to place these bets in New York. And until they do, New Jersey and Pennsylvania and Nevada will be so well ahead of New York because they don't have their crap together in terms of the functionality of wagering.
Who's doing it right? Jersey?
Jersey, absolutely. Pennsylvania, but Jersey and Nevada.
And that's going to be the standard for all other places once we sort of get through the dark ages.
I think until all the states or the bigger states have the ability to bet on your phone and you don't have to be there in person or bet on your computer, people are still going to bet offshore and they're going to bet on the online casinos where you don't have to be in that state to do it.
You'll bet on the Eagles this week? You'll bet on the Ravens this week, Jim?
I don't bet on my favorite team, but I would probably bet on the Ravens. Carson Wentz, for the first time, even though he threw 2 interceptions, looked like Carson Wentz. And it's amazing how a guy who was a practice squad player for Green Bay, the Eagles, and the Lions opened up Carson Wentz to throwing the ball because he doesn't trust any of his receivers. It's Travis Fulgham, a 6th-round pick out of Old Dominion, who didn't play high school football till he was late in his years. He played 7-on-7 football overseas because his father was in the military. And the guy had 10 catches for 153 yards, and he looked like a guy who could go up and get it. And the Eagles have had such poor success in drafting wide receivers or keeping them healthy that Wentz he just doesn't feel comfortable throwing the ball.
Well, I hope he stays uncomfortable this weekend. Certainly the Ravens defense made Joe Burrow uncomfortable last week, and 5 sacks off the edge, 7 overall, taking the ball away. Though. Yeah, I love Joe Burrow. I said beautiful things about him all week. We had half of Cincinnati on last week. Everybody loves him. And then he really looked overwhelmed on Sunday for the first time ever. And, hats off to Wink for making that happen. But as much as we've spent so much time and I'll use the one story because it's the only time I've been in an airport since I left the Super Bowl. But I flew down to Houston 2 weeks ago, and I was in the gift shop there in the bookstore, magazine store where I haven't been, and every magazine cover had Lamar on it, right? Every preseason. So you're talking about Lamar and the Ravens and Lamar and Mahomes and Lamar and all this. And, boy, the Ravens defense has been better than advertised, and that's something I think we're starting to talk about around here.
Oh, they're great. Speaking of Lamar, I am a fantasy player, and I was reading that he was either the first or second fantasy quarterback drafted in every league this year, and he's 11th right now in fantasy quarterbacks. And part of it is he hasn't run as often as he has last year. Part of it is they get ahead early, and they take him out. They took him out in a game earlier this year.
My favorite games. I'm hoping he's eating a tasty cake and a pretzel with me in the fourth quarter.
What do you think? I'm going to interview you on your own show.
Oh, here we go. Now it gets good.
One of the sports books did a prop. Will he come back from a 10-point deficit at all this year? Because he has yet to do that. And one of the knocks on him, whether it's fair or not, has been that he hasn't shown the ability to play behind. Fair or not?
Oh, I think it's a fair criticism, but the other part of that is one of the reasons that's such an interesting prop bet is how many times will he get behind by 10 points? So that was the issue last year. It's hard to get behind by 10 points when you're up 45-6 on Monday night wearing those purple Barney outfits out in L.A. last year. The question is, will they fall behind? And what's the recipe for them to fall behind? The recipe for them to fall behind is to go for it on 4th and 2 from their own 28, not make it, and Wentz puts them up 7-0, makes them pay on the next play, and then they fumble a kickoff, or Lamar makes a bad read, or somebody strips the ball, then they fall behind 14-0. Against anyone, if they fall behind, they're going to have to play a little differently than run the ball and play the way they've wanted to play. I don't think they get to climb that mountain until they fall behind again, and they've only really done that against good teams like Kansas City that have put them to sleep.
I'm going to give you one stat, and then speaking of Army-Navy, we're trying to figure out what we're going to do this year. They still don't know if they're going to be fans there. I'm assuming there will be now, since the Eagles are allowed to have 7,500 people in the building, and I actually have a conference call in a couple of minutes. The Eagles, the worst in the NFL in misdirection. They've allowed rushing touchdowns to wide receivers and are first in yards rushing by wide receivers this year. The Rams absolutely destroyed them with all of their misdirections and their wide receivers going in motion. So if the Ravens out of that, they will have a field day against the Eagles.
I pray for my good friend Jim Schwartz this weekend. Jimmy, take care of yourself. I'm sorry we won't see each other at Radio Row. If we do, it'll be a miracle. It'll be nice. There'll be some sunshine. We'll be wearing some sandals. But if not, I hope that we connect somewhere down the road. Always enjoy getting your emails and enjoy your company, man. Thanks for coming on.
Happy to come on anytime. Best of luck to you and your wife, Jen, and hope she's doing great.
No, she's doing great, man. I appreciate you. Jimmy Shapiro joining us from the left coast out in Seattle. He doesn't think it's the best coast, but it's the west coast. And he is an Eagles fan, trapped out there. Been involved with Army-Navy for a long time, and the Vegas community, as well as just being one of my friends who's an Eagles fan. And I just thought, what a week. Let's have him on. Why not? That was fun. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. We're also having a bunch of my teachers on Teacher Appreciation Month here. My first grade teacher, Miss Janda, came on earlier this week. I found my college media professor who taught me Marshall McLuhan back in college in 1992, Julie Simon, who's still at UB, came on this week, as well as Miss Monday, my 10th grade English teacher, Sue Monday, who's hosted News Talk Radio in Delaware for the last decade and a half. So good stuff there. Lots of new stuff up at Baltimore Positive, including the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, who checked in with us last week, and Steny Hoyer and Dutch Rupersberger, all in one place. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 at WNST Taos in Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore Positive.